So whose car were you traveling around in all this time?
That's a different story now.
Well, at that point, it was mostly Dan's car.
Because he had the biggest car.
Yeah, because there were always 8 of us. So.
We had a Studebaker Dictator, small. It was a 5-passenger car, but Dan's father had this big Buick, and that thing took care of all of us. We were eight in the car all the time.
Yeah, kind of stuffed in there.
But Dad
was there
had
a rumble
to be,
seat or?
No, we just stuffed in, you know.
we took turns of sitting on each other's lap.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
They used to call them the torture rides.
They were at the times. 9 times out of 10, you got stuck in a corner somehow, wondering how you
So
get up.
Uncle Louis was able to go to IIT for a short time, you say?
No, he finally graduated and got his degree.
Did he have a scholarship too, or what?
No, he didn't. No.
Well, that's too bad that you didn't get to go to the University of Chicago.
Yes, Rita had even offered to my father to, you know, kind of finance it, but no, he didn't think that was the thing to do. So.
Well, that's funny, because then after I ended up working at the University of Chicago, you used to come down there, and I never knew that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what were in high school? What were your major interests? What did
Well, actually, I had taken a lot of science and French as my foreign language, and I guess I had a pretty good accent, because I remember Miss Chamberlain, who was our French teacher, loved to talk to me, and when Miss Ligorio was going to go to Europe, she'd always say, let's talk in front of her so that she'll get the ear and the timbre of the French language. And of course, she had this very nasal pitch, which I understand is supposed to be very good for French.
Yeah. So when did you guys get married?
We were married July 18th, 1936. And we had quite a large wedding. We were married, strangely enough, at the same church where my mother and dad were married, at St. Michael's Church.
Mm-hmm.
Where you, Bob, were later baptized, you made your communion
and confirmed
there.
That's right.
No.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's stop at the marriage.
Okay.
Because then we can talk about your married life together.
But
okay.
Yeah, but have you stopped the camera?
All right. Well, no, I thought maybe Dad could start on his early life.
Yeah.
Well,
and bring us up to this point.
Yeah, I was going to say we
Yeah,
want to
let's just do that.
Okay.
about.
Yeah. And here.
But I actually had a few more questions for Lola too.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
You think we don't have time?
Go ahead.
Well, let's see. I was wondering, for one thing, Dino is a little older than you, and I was wondering, how that happened. In terms of your growing up together, was there a range of ages of kids that played together?
Well, I was the baby of the group.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I was a pretty big, I was as big as I am now, and I looked a lot older for one thing. And
That's
then,
right, very deceiving.
Yeah, and then of course, I used to pal around with Dora a bit, because she was closer to my age. And of course with Ella and Renato, we were there so often because, like I say, they were almost like kin. And Dan, we were cousins. And then he started dating Laura, so that's how that group kind of got together. And we ranged there was anywhere from 6 to 7 years difference between me and you and Ray.
Well,
Dan
Ray
was a year younger,
my age.
and Laura was about 4 years older than me, and
But you
Dora
didn't
was
know-
only 2.
excuse me, you didn't know Dino when you were little, did you?
No.
Or did
No,
you?
no, I didn't. Actually, I
was
met.
going to narrate the
Oh, how
part
you met me.
how I met
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so let's go back then to
Alright.
your childhood
Yeah,
and
that's
then
a
go
good-
Then
through.
you can say
Well,
hello.
Yeah.
my childhood was altogether different than hers.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I was born on 24th Place, 2 doors away from St. Michael's Church. And
You were born in June, weren't you?
June, 1911.
Now,
My
wait.
father came here from Italy about 1907, right after he did his hitch in the Italian Army. In the Italian Army, you have to do a 1-year hitch. I think it's still the same, I'm
Yeah.
not sure. So as soon as he got through with that, and he came here with others from the same town, and they all got a job on the railroad, of course, together with her grandpa,
Grandpa
who was the cook.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh
they-
yeah.
And they said all the cats in the neighborhood disappeared right
Oh.
around that time.
This was Nanapucci.
Yeah, Nanapucci.
Now,
Yeah,
what
my
was the
mother's
name of the
father.
town where they came from?
Yeah.
So then my father got a job at the McCormick Works, where almost everybody in the neighborhood worked. And about 1910, I think, is when he sent for us, because we were still in Italy. Or my
You
mother,
weren't
my
born.
mother was still in
Yeah.
Italy.
Yeah.
Born
And
there.
then about 1910, he sent for her. And
So your mom came over in 1910, and he had come in
he came over in 1907.
7. And when did your folks come, Mom?
Oh, about the same time, I think.
Probably.
Sure.
I don't.
There were a lot of the people that eventually grouped in the west side there. They all came about the same time. And
I think my mother must have been around 1910. Yeah.
yeah,
And my dad probably a year earlier or something
the
because.
men always came ahead of them
To-
so that they could establish a place to live, you know, get a job and so on.
But they didn't know each other, my mother and dad.
No, not at that
and-
time.
And they met here.
So then I
But your
came,
folks were already married.
yeah,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they were married in 1907.
well, before coming here,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think your mom had a miscarriage and lost a child.
That I don't know
Before
anything
you,
about.
I think she
was
had
never told
mentioned.
about it. All I know about my mother was that in her younger days she was a governess for a rich family, and she lived in Cairo, Egypt for a long time.
Oh,
Really?
And oh yeah, she was a beautiful woman.
Huh.
And
We have some early pictures
She-
of her somewhere.
eventually, well, she was in love with somebody else.
oh.
Actually, what happened. And I think my father came along on a rebound. So there was always that little jealousy in there, you know. My father was always very jealous of my mother. And anyway, when she came here, then I came along in 1911. At just about that time, the trouble in Europe was brewing.
The first
And,
World War.
And yeah,
Yeah.
the First World War. And my father got drafted here in this country.
He was drafted in, what was it, 1914, I think, because you were about.
In early 1914,
Yeah.
he got drafted. And my mother felt that she wanted to be with her family in Italy for some reason.
So they had all become citizens right away.
Well, when Domino came, there was something where you were granted citizenship, so that, and then if you were a citizen before 1921, was it, or
21, yeah.
something, then automatically your wife also became a
Became a
citizen.
citizen.
Oh.
She didn't have to go through
Something
the
in that
citizenship deal.
thing. My mother instead had to get her own papers.
So anyway, my mother decided to go back to Italy. And we went across on a troop ship. Some of the things that happened on the troop ship I can remember. When we got over to the Canary Islands, the ship ran out of coal.
This was
1914.
1914. The war was already
Oh yes,
raging.
It was going on pretty good at that time.
And your father was in the American Army?
In the American
Ah,
Army. That's right.
interesting.
And we were stuck at the Canary Islands for about 7 days until a barge ship came and to supply us with it. In the meantime, the soldiers were having a hell of a time, you know, swimming down in the ocean and everything else. But anyway, we landed in Marseille, and then from there, I don't remember too much about how we got to Italy, but we were there from 1914 to the winter of 1920.
So you were about 4 or 5
I
years
was about
old
4 years old
at the time.
And
Had you been speaking? You were talking by then, but were you still
Italian.
speaking Italian even here?
oh sure, when we came back in 1920, I couldn't speak a word of English.
Sure.
But anyway, we stayed with my grandpa Pucci. Incidentally, her family's name was Pucci also.
Yeah,
But they were not related.
No,
No.
not related, but both of the maiden
And
names.
my father's, the Benedettis, they lived a short ways away from this. And we walked it back and forth. I had an uncle, my father's brother was Baffi, they called him, Caesar. And he had another brother, Koki, who later was in this country also. And we stayed there for, well, almost 6 years, I would say. They sent me to school, but I don't think I learned too much. I had my first communion there in the same church that we visited when we were there. And in 1920, Bruno Fabri's father and mother came to get us at the railroad station. It was midnight when we landed in there. And they took us to their flat on 25th Street.
Well, now wait a minute. Before you get back to America, what was some of the life like there in Italy?
Oh,
He was a hellion.
yeah, well, I was quite wild in those
Yeah.
days, so they tell me.
Well, you didn't have your father there, right? I mean, you
No,
were away
no.
from your father this whole time, right?
That's right, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And
And his poor grandfather had that whole
oh,
thing
that was an incident,
of-
yeah.
of,
There were 2 incidents, actually.
Yeah,
One of them, I used to see him pruning the grapevines, you know. Everyone, they were sharecroppers, actually. And they had about I forget what it was, an acre and a half of land, 2 acres. And on this land, they had to grow enough food for the family for the
and
whole
half-
year.
And half.
And half went to the landlord. So I used to see him pruning the grapevines, you know, and he had these shears. So one day, I guess I was going to help him, and I went along and I cut all the grapevines.
Oh,
All the stems that had little grapes on them.
oh.
And the way he used to punish me, he used to hit me with his hat.
He must have had the most misshapen in Italy.
But anyway, they caught me in time so that I didn't ruin the whole thing. But I used to help him with the plowing. We used to use 2 oxen, one in the front, one in the back. And my grandpa would be handling the plow, and I would sit on the bar that connected the 2 oxen together, and I would guide the front oxen, although they didn't need any guide. They knew exactly what to do by themselves. But anyway, then they'd use this grape and make the wine, and this was a community deal. A couple of neighbors on either side would all work together. Once a week, they would take their flour to the ovens to make bread, and that lasted a whole week. These were loaves, 5-pound loaves, about this long, this high, about this wide.
These were community ovens?
Community ovens.
Yeah, and they still did it, because when we were by Fosca, the man delivered the bread and he carried it in on his shoulder because it was, you could kill somebody with it.
They're 5 pounds. Anyway.
I'm interested, who ran the ovens? Did you have to pay to use the ovens, or did everybody chip in?
I guess everybody chipped in. I don't know. The same way with the harvest. The harvest was all done in one yard. And we had these long sticks tied together with a piece of leather, and they would beat it on the ground.
Yeah.
Later on,